How are you anyway?
I'm great. How are you?
Yes, all good, all good. You know what? Your book is really good. I was reading through it all, and I like the fact that at the beginning you start talking about the how you can paddle because it's really good for people like myself. I've never paddled before. You see, nearly 37 years worth of life, I've never paddled
Well,
before.
this could be a new hobby for you. Well, thank you
Yes.
very much for being such a great customer.
But since I last saw you, you got back on the Tuesday, didn't you? And started working again, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so I had sort of the graveyard train back on the Tuesday 'cause it's the
Huh.
cheapest one. No, kind of it's all been fairly regular. We had our housewarming party on Friday.
Oh, nice.
My boyfriend and I moved into a place a few months ago, but we hadn't got around to having
Oh.
the housewarming yet. So yeah,
And
we have
did you guys buy it as well?
no, we're renting.
Rent it.
But we've got a garden for the dog, and yeah, it's a little bit further up the centre, so it was nice to sort of have everyone round and show them like what we've done with the place and stuff. But like I must be getting old, Chebs, because it wiped me out for the weekend. Like
I
after that, we were like, furthest we could get was like the park with the dog, and we're just like, oh, we'll just chill out here. I think also I've been on the move a lot, like this month. So
yeah.
it was a very lazy weekend and a very rainy weekend here as well.
Generally, Lyon is slightly more cheaper, isn't it, than Paris by a good long way? Is that right?
Yeah, good long way. I'd say it's probably like, I mean, it's not cheap cheap because it's getting more and more popular with Parisians that want to downsize. So it's probably a bit like London and Bristol.
Okay.
I think that Lyon's that bit more compact, that little bit kind of like edgier, but like the rental prices are definitely a bit cheaper. Like it's so much better than living in London.
Well, exactly. And you could work from Lyon and but still write for UK publications. But I think even 10 years ago, you would have had to have gone into the office in Fleet Street and would have had to have worked whoever. You'd have to go into the office and write for the day, and then they'll give you like a temporary pass or whatever, and you go in, you write it, and then the editor. Because I know, do you know who Sarah Lee is?
Sarah Lee, no.
She's taught me anyway. Her journalism career started in the newsroom, and then for 20 years, she was saying she got all of her learning from there. And I swear, this is what she said to me, that if the editor didn't like the piece, they'd literally get up and start cursing, like swearing, effing and blinding, going, "What the f is this?
Oh
Give me."
my God, so
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh no, no, it was very, very sort of
dramatic.
very cutthroat. But it toughened her out. She said.
Sounds kinda like Devil Wears Prada newsroom style.
She wasn't the only one that said that to me. There was my other friend Ernest. He said the same thing. You just literally throw the piece of paper back and saying, what is this? Give me a better piece. I want it back on my desk by." But that's what it was like. I don't think you'll get that now. I think that you have to be slightly more softer. With,
Shit
well, so,
sandwich though.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely would not, as an editor, sort of, because you have to find a way of working with a person. But those days, she was saying, no, no, you'd see it all the time. But then it toughened her out. She was saying, so it makes it a bit more.
Mm.
So the contrast is now that you don't have to go into the office. I think a lot of freelancers, yeah, I think they did go in regularly to do the work because they wanted to monitor what you were doing. I think now there's a lot of trusters in there that you can, if I set you a piece like I did, I can write, okay, I can trust that she's gonna do the research, do this, and write the piece, and it makes it a bit
Honestly, I
more.
have no idea how much it's changed because I haven't been in this for long enough. But I mean, neither
Neither
have
have
you,
I.
have you? You said it
No,
was
neither
only
have I. No, no, no.
5
Yeah,
years.
yeah, it was only 5 years
Yeah.
ago. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So I mean, I only started during the pandemic, so it's kind of impossible for me to say what it would have been like before.
but I'm sure you would have been able to have handled whatever came your way, and you just adjust, don't you?
Maybe it would have toughened me up.
Do you know? Do you
Maybe
not?
I'd have had less fear of rejected pictures and everything.
Do you not think you're tough enough now?
I think I'm
Well,
right.
listen, we haven't even started yet, so we should really get the intro done and talk about your book, which is why I brought you in here. As you've been watching there, that was my behind the scenes chat with travel journalist Anna Richards, as she's come on the show to discuss her new book, Paddling France 40 Best Places to Explore by SUP Kayak and Canoeing. During our discussion, you'll find out her journey into writing this book, her love for the water, her career, and what's in store for her next. before we go into all of that, here's how you can support the channel. You can support the channel by heading over to www.shebsthewonder.com. You'll be able to see the store tab, which you can hover over to and click. You can then buy various items from t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, even water bottles and phone cases. If you have any questions, you can send me a message through the contact tab. Without further ado, here is my discussion with Anna Richards. Anna, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on. I've been reading your book, which is Paddling France, and you talk about the 40 best places to explore. Before we go into your book and discuss it, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
I've also got my book here as well. I'm Anna, and I am a travel writer. I first started writing when I was living back in Cornwall during the pandemic, and a huge part of what I was writing about was water sports. It was one of the few things that I could do as restrictions started to ease. So I used to go off on adventures on my paddleboard, sometimes multi-day adventures, and write about them. So when I moved to France, writing about water sports and my new home, it was a happy marriage of these two areas of my life.
Well, we'll come on to more about your career in a second, but just another question I always ask when people come on, and it's just a general interest on how you actually fell in love with travel. So for you, when was the first hook?
I fell in love with travel a lot longer ago. My family didn't actually like to travel very far. We usually went over to France, which I guess makes sense that I'm living there now. But we'd usually go over to France camping, or we'd holiday actually in Cornwall, which is where I'm from. Because my dad was very proud of his Cornish roots, and he used to say, "Oh well, it's no place more beautiful than here, so we'll just hop over to the other coast and go camping there." And the first time that I travelled really independently, it was after my first year of university, and I sort of scrimped and saved. I've been working a little bit part time, had a bit of my own left, and I went to Thailand with a couple of friends. And I didn't do Thailand well at all. When I look back at how I did Thailand, like I was kind of probably the worst kind of Brit abroad, but it gave me this first taste of freedom. And I was a languages student. I studied French and Spanish. And the main reason that I chose to study languages was because it came with a year abroad. And I really maxed out this year abroad from the end of my second year. There were a couple of days between my last class and me heading over to France. Second half of my year, I was in South America, and I got back, a week or two before term started for the fourth year, and I had just had the most amazing time. I'd done everything as cheaply as possible. So there'd been a lot of
Mm.
hitchhiking and couch surfing, and I just come into contact with so many different people and formed so many friendships and had so many weird and wacky experiences. And when I came back from my final year of university, all I wanted to do was hit the road again. And when everyone else was, going to graduate fairs and signing on to grad schemes, all I wanted to do was go off traveling. So after university, I got a bar job,
Okay.
and I saved up as much as I could. And as soon as I had enough money, I went backpacking around India for essentially as long as the money would hold for.
I always think that because I traveled myself younger with family, but when I first went away for the first time myself, it sounds like a bit like yourself, where you learn how to navigate, you learn how to be independent, and it sounds like you got that experience whilst you were away for the first time properly. I would say when you were in university, and to go back to India as well, and to hitchhike. Did you say you were hitchhiking in South America?
Yes. Yeah.
That's quite brave for. I'm assuming you had friends with you, or were you on your own doing that?
Not always. Occasionally, I did it on my own. I don't know whether it's brave or stupid, but
Oh, that's
I,
very brave. Let's put
I
it that
tend
way.
to be a bit of a kind of an eternal optimist,
Okay.
and I think that there's some ways that that I travelled then that if I ever have a daughter, I would not want her travelling the
Mm.
same way that I was, but. I think it did make me incredibly rich in life experience. I think that when you hitchhike, and I do a lot of carpooling as well. I still do, a lot of blah blah
Yes.
car, and you meet so many different people that you would never cross in ordinary life. And I just think I think that actually that's really played well into what I write,
Hmm.
because I have this real curiosity about people, and
Mm.
everyone has a story. So quite often, you'll hop in a stranger's car and you have no idea what you're going to be talking about,
Yeah.
and they'll come out with something fascinating, and I'm like, right, there's a story.
And you're never worried about your safety then, or do you always trust the person that you're getting in the car with, or I don't know.
Definitely worried about my safety, and I think that I have got a lot more cautious about the way that I hitchhike now. I mean, when I was on my year abroad at university, I mean, I was 20 when I set off, and in France, at any rate, I would hitch rides with lorry drivers. I would not hitch a ride in a lorry anymore. I think that I had this kind of real like naivety and kind of youthful optimism that everything would be okay. And I did have some dodgy experiences, which fortunately didn't escalate too much. But there are definitely more precautions that I would take now.
As a guy though, I have never would have thought about hitchhiking or going through it because I would think about my safety. I wasn't sure, but as we all there's all sorts of stories and books written about solo female travelers, how tough it is, and it's very different dynamic to a guy traveling. So. As I said, you're very brave to have done what you've done, and it's you're sitting here right now telling. Maybe you could write a book on this in the future, so you never know. People listening, commission Anna for to write a book about her journey in the early days. So
And
it'd be
Hitchhiker's
interesting.
Guide
A
to
hitchhiker's guide, yeah. How to be safe, how to do things properly. But let's come on to your book as well now. So it's Paddling France, and I really enjoyed reading the book. I loved it, and I bought it from you when I saw you a couple of weeks ago. So thank you very much for that. With every chapter, you talk about the essentials of where, because it's 40 best places in France. And sorry, could I just quickly ask you, you went to all of these 40 different places, didn't you, to paddle in France
Yes.
before you were, so I speak to sometimes authors who sometimes not necessarily have gone to all the places, but would have, especially if you're writing for like a big publication, they'll have researchers go out and then they'll feed back. And that does happen, by the way, because sometimes time, logistics, and whatnot, you don't get the chance. But to have done 40 different places, was that during the last 5 years, or was it before, years back? Or tell us how you got to 40 different places.
It was all during the last year and a half, actually. The whole kind of thing about writing this guidebook, it came around by accident, to be honest. I was really quite early on in my career. I'd only been writing full time for under a year, and I was desperate to write for guidebook companies. I think I had this dream of appearing in Lonely Planet and Brat and Rough Guides and things like that. So I contacted a few guidebook companies saying that I really wanted to be considered to contribute to their guidebooks on France, on Lyon and the surrounding areas, which is where I was living. And I contacted Brat at a good time. They'd published a book mid start of the pandemic called Paddling Britain,
Mhm.
um, by a woman who'd done a guidebook to paddleboarding around the UK, and it had sold incredibly well and turned into their best-selling guidebook. And they thought, hey, this would be great to expand this and do other countries. And the next country we'd like to do would be France. So when this relatively unexperienced writer got in touch with them, and most of my portfolio from when I was in Cornwall was about paddleboarding and adventures that I've been having around there, but I was messaging them from France. The editor got back to me and said, look, we don't need a contributing writer on a Lyon guide, but we were looking for somebody to write an entire guidebook and travel all over France and do all of this. And it didn't take me very long to say yes, absolutely.
They offered you the job straight away, even though you felt as though you didn't have the experience.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, it takes a bit longer than that, from sort of the time when they were like, "We're interested in you doing this." I then had to put together a book proposal. We went through several meetings. I did a sample route in Lyon and wrote a sample chapter for them. So it took a few months for them to for everything to go through and for them
Okay.
to accept it. And then from the time that I signed the contract to submitting the manuscript, it was about a year that I had to research. But when you're doing Watersports Guide, it's very seasonal as well. There's certain places that you can't paddle in the winter, and it's certainly a lot less pleasant to paddle in the winter. So it was then, trying to work out how I was going to balance this with my other projects. I was going to choose as well, because 40 routes, it sounds like a lot, but
Mm.
there's so much scope in France. It's a big country. Yeah, so it was particularly towards the end of that year. It was incredibly busy. Very very long days, a lot of time on the road.
It's interesting because you were saying you had to go through a couple of testers really, so they were trying to test to see what your writing was like. So anyone new who's thinking of writing a book, there is a trial period, I suppose, to see if you would fit the criteria. And it's interesting that were able to fit everything in and get everything, because as I said, it's a very well written book. You've gone through to all these 40 different places, and I suppose the question is for you, paddle boarding. I mean, how did you start off? Was it just through when you were living in Cornwall, or where did that passion come for paddling?
Again, kind of by chance, and I think that a lot of things in my career now have come about a little bit by chance. But I'm a very big hiker, and just before the pandemic started, I had taken yet another sabbatical because I'd worked for long enough that I had enough money to be able to afford to go off backpacking again, and I went back to South America. And the main thing that I just wanted to do was walk and walk and walk. So I'd set off on multi-day hikes with my tent. I'd come back and check into a hostel and shower and eat a lot of food for a few days, and then I'd set off again. When the pandemic happened, I found myself back in Cornwall, with no job, living off the charity of my niece and her boyfriend. My niece is quite similar in age to me, and all of this kind of all of this time and nothing to do with it, and no money either. And that was when I started writing, because I was going sort of stir crazy. Obviously, couldn't move very far from home, and as restrictions lifted a little bit, I started hiking a lot around Cornwall, going along the southwest coastal path and cycling a lot. But I also started paddleboarding, and in a time where you were really sort of trying to distance yourself from other people. When you set off on your paddleboard, I mean, you could easily get to places that weren't even accessible with a footpath or anything like that. So I started doing more and more paddleboarding. There was a paddleboarding club in the town in Cornwall that I lived in, so it was one of the first things to reopen. Because if you're all on your own paddleboard, it's you're quite distant from other people anyway. And as things got a little bit easier, that's when I started paddleboarding and camping. And I mean, I had very little fodder to write about as well. So these were the biggest adventures that I was having. So I wrote about this slow travel, and it seemed quite similar in a way to hiking, and what I'd loved about hiking, just that I'd swapped, Patagonian mountains for the Cornish coast, which is equally
Hmm.
beautiful in its own way. But by going to places on a paddleboard, I could get these places that felt really inaccessible, really untouched. You could watch the sunrise from a cave and things like this. So it had that charm of just getting away from it all, and feeling as though you were the only person who'd ever seen these views, when it's obviously not the case. But just having this kind of this world to yourself.
I go back to the book now, and obviously it's a guidebook, and there's lots of advice that you give, especially transportation. You could talk about carpooling and hitchhiking before. That there's a lot of that as well that you talk about. So someone picking this up, what would you expect them to gain from it? And do you feel as though that it's a book that they can take away, and then not just necessarily France, by the way, they can obviously go to the places that you've written about, but these are sort of advice I can take along wherever I paddle.
I mean, I hope so. I would say that the advice that I've given is no substitute for a lesson as well. I think that if you've never got on a paddleboard or a kayak before, I think it's always worth taking a lesson. But I hope this kind of gives a good foundation. But the great thing about paddleboarding and kayaking as well is that virtually anyone can do it. It's kind of like hiking, that it doesn't it can be as physical or as relaxed as you like. And the difficulty when you're putting together a guidebook is that you want it to be able to appeal to all levels as well. I want somebody who has never got on a paddleboard before, but who thinks, okay, well, I'd love to do that, to be able to pick up paddling France and to test out a route. But then you also want to be able to give challenges to people that do a lot of this. Um, so there's a difficulty rating.
When you say difficulty rating, what do you mean by that? Sorry.
We've rated with my editor. We put together ratings for doing each route, which went from one, which was the easiest, to five, which was the most difficult. There's a key in the introduction which tells you kind of what those ratings mean, and I've also put in a different rating for if you're tackling it on a paddleboard or a kayak, because sometimes that can differ, especially if there's rapids and things like that. So if you are a beginner paddler, you're probably going to be looking at chapters that have a difficulty rating of one or two.
Hmm.
Five is, really it's not just being physically fit; it's having quite a bit of technical ability as well. It's knowing the terrain a little bit. It's knowing that you're wised up to things like tides and currents. So yeah, there's a guide in the introduction that talks you through what should be safe and manageable and enjoyable at your level.
One thing I remember you talked about was if you're going alone, make sure you tell a friend that you're going paddling because you just never know with, and also weather as well. You talked about, so these sort of things are part of the safety element of when it comes to paddling or kayaking. I have kayak, by the way. That's one thing I have done now that you mentioned it. But yeah, I have kayak. But you've got to be absolutely careful because you just never know. Anything could happen when you're going in the water.
Accidents can kind of happen anywhere, and obviously if you're in the water, that can obviously be a lot worse. And like wearing a buoyancy aid is really important. You can be the most confident paddleboarder out there, but if your fin catches on something and you hit your head, like there's not much that can help you if you're not wearing a buoyancy aid.
Now that the book is out and it's out for everyone to buy, what's your expectation and what would you want out of it? And going forward, what's the next steps for you?
Oh, that's a very good question because I don't think I'm very good at advanced planning. As I as I told you, everything's kind of
Mhm.
fallen fallen into place. I really hope that people find it helpful and that it gives them a lot of inspiration and that helps people. I hope that it helps a lot of people to discover a new hobby, but also that it encourages people to kind of to slow down while they travel, to kind of to take, well, it's not really the slow road, is it? It's the slow river, or
Mhm.
but to see parts of France that they wouldn't have otherwise experienced, and just kind of connects with nature. I think that the funny thing is when you've written a book like this, it took quite a long time to decide which 40 routes I was going to do. And then as I was researching, there were a few that changed, when I found a route that just seemed spectacular that I absolutely had to put in. But now that I've written this book, quite a few people will say to me, "Oh, well, have you tried paddling here?" And
Mhm.
I'll say, "No, I haven't." So now I almost feel as though I finished writing a guide to paddleboarding, and now I've almost got a longer list of places that I want to hit the water in France. But yeah, so I just hope that it helps people plan really lovely adventures and see a different side to France from the water.
Do you want to specialize yourself and niche yourself into this sort of area? Because your work itself is there's a variety of things that you write when it comes to your travel writing, etc. A lot of it is within the French region. Would you want to niche out and paddle elsewhere? Would you want to be classed as someone that people come to for this sort of stuff, or do you want to be as will have as much as variety in your work as others like myself like to have?
It's a difficult question because I would say that my niche is very much France at the moment. I enjoy. I mean, I love France. I think it's a beautiful country. I like the fact that living here and speaking the language, I feel as though I can uncover stories and discover areas that are very much off the beaten track. And my other kind of predicament is that I've really changed the way that I travel, and I'm very much down the slow travel route where I try to fly as little as possible. I'm allowing myself to fly absolute maximum once a year, and I don't fly within Europe. So I don't know whether if I was going to branch out and do paddleboarding guides for other countries, I think that neighbouring countries that I could get to quite easily from France, say Italy, Switzerland, Spain, I would be very interested. I think they're absolutely beautiful as well. Um, but I think that what I would be possibly more interested in doing, because much as I love paddleboarding and kayaking, I think that my love for France means that I'd quite like to see that from different angles. I'd love to work on a hiking guide to France or a bike packing guide to France, for example. And now that I've, kind of gone through, I suppose, the belly of France and all the waterways, it would be great to be, doing all sort of the mountain peaks and things like that and writing about it.
That's an idea. So you want to expand from just not just paddling, but you want to do all your other interest hiking, as you said there. But and also you can, as you said there, maybe go to places like Italy, which is closer and stuff. I was just thinking whether if you wanted to paddle, let's just say if you went to South America and you can paddle there, are you open to staying there? And it depends as well the deal that you have. If you're living out there, are things going to be covered for you? You'd have to be there for an extended period of time. Or I think with a book, sometimes you could be there for maybe a month or so. You've done all your bits and bobs that you needed to do, and then write a book. So that's an option as well, if you were to discuss it with an editor.
I think that, a place that I already have a great affinity with, it definitely would be of interest. I think, sort of the challenge of perhaps paddling routes that hadn't been done before, I think that could really interest me, particularly in South America, which is, a place that I've traveled around extensively. But I would need a very good chunk of time to do so. So it also depends, whether it's kind of feasible as well. In France, I could mix researching a guidebook with my other projects. If I was to, say go off and paddle the Amazon for a couple of months, is it financially viable? I don't know, but it's definitely not something that I'd rule out because I am a sucker for an adventure and a crazy plan. So, if an editor got in touch with me tomorrow and said, "Hey, would you like to spend sort of 2 months paddleboarding down the Amazon and write about it?" I would very much struggle to say no to something like that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, now that you're an author, how does it feel to have a book in all the bookstores? And I was at a bookstore yesterday. Actually, I won't mention the name for advertising reason, but I saw your book there. How does it feel when you go in and you see your book on a shelf?
Well, I've only actually been able to go to a bookshop and see my book on the shelf once because it's not stocked so widely in France because it's a book in English.
Yeah.
So it was funny when I got my copies and it was a very kind of anticlimactic moment because it was just a Tuesday morning. I wasn't expecting to get them that morning and I was just at home with the dog, and I opened this parcel and stuff. I saw my first book for the first time and I had nobody to show it to. So, I was just sort of there waving it at the dog who, looked at it like it was a tasty snack. So when I came over to London the other week, when I met you, I went into a bookshop. I went to the travel section and there it was. And that felt a lot more real. Before I suppose it kind of been a bit surreal. It didn't really feel as though I had a book out, but the act of walking into a bookshop and seeing it was really cool. And, obviously I shuffled around the books and I put it right at the front. And yeah, I hope my my book shuffling worked and someone bought it.
Did you feel as though at the minute it's such a surreal moment? I've got a book, you've got a book out, you're writing for major publications. Do you feel as though this is all sort of a blur, a bit of a dream? Someone's gonna want to wake up anytime soon. It's not real. How do you feel as being an established author now and a successful travel writer?
Realistically, like an imposter,
Yeah.
which is a shame. And I wonder if, everyone kind of feels a bit the same because as you say, it has been a very quick progression. And I think that what worries me is that, it's all happened very quickly and I love what I'm doing. I think that, this is a wonderful life and moving to France was the best possible decision. But I kind of wonder, especially with the state of journalism at the moment, how long that can last for as well. But I remember, at my old job, I worked for a travel company for some years, and I remember my old boss saying to me, "Well, we all wish that we could be travel writers, but obviously, who really gets to do that as a job? So we do the next best thing. We work for a travel company so that we can
Mhm.
still go away." And just a few years later, I'm like, God, I am a travel writer. What a cool job to have. But I think that you never stop doubting yourself. I doubt myself just as much now as I did when I had, sort of one byline under my belt. I still sort of think that if editors haven't got back to me sort of 1 week, oh gosh, no one will ever hire me again. That's it. The dream is over. So yeah, it's a funny one. I wonder if anyone ever kind of gets to the point where they don't worry about that anymore.
the imposter syndrome goes through everyone at some point, no matter how successful you are. So what was the reason why initially you moved to France as well, by the way? Because moving from the UK is a leap. Why was France, I know you did say you went to France when you were younger with your family. Why was France such a appealing place for you?
It came around from a complete life crisis, to be honest with you. I'd started writing. I'd got my old job back at the travel company as well a few months after the pandemic started, and I was working remotely. And in the summer of 2021, my dad got very sick. They diagnosed, they found his body was absolutely riddled with secondary cancer, to the extent that they couldn't even identify which the first one had been. And he died within the space of, it was just over a month from when he was diagnosed
I'm
to when he died.
really sorry to hear that.
Well, it kind of, it's a funny thing. I was incredibly close to my dad, and we used to, well, not paddleboarding together. We used to do a lot of water sports together. He taught me how to row when I was small. He taught me how to sail, and we used to go to France on holiday quite a bit, just the two of us as well, because we were really sort of like that. And my mum and sister quite liked being at home, so my dad and I would just sort of trot off to France together on little trips. And when my dad died and I wasn't enjoying my job anymore, and I felt as though my creativity was kind of limited, I thought, okay, I need a big change. And the thing about growing up in Cornwall is that although people are very well meaning, everyone knows you, and everyone knew my family, everyone knew my dad, and it was very difficult to leave the house without, sort of somebody saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry about what happened," or "How are you doing?" And it's very well meaning, but you can't escape it at all.
Mm.
It's kind of the grief's always there. So I decided that I was going to quit my job, and that I wanted to move abroad for a year and give writing a real bash and see if I could make something of it. And I wanted to go somewhere where I spoke the language, so that limited me to francophone countries, or Spanish-speaking countries. And I didn't want to go too far from my mum, because I knew that she was struggling. And, with borders closing the whole time, I thought it would be kind of selfish to go back to Argentina, even if I'd loved it. So I thought, okay, I'll go to France. I love France. I used to go a lot with my dad. So that feels kind of right at the moment. And worst case scenario, if, nobody hires me, no one wants to publish what I'm writing, if I go there for a year, I'll come back poorer, but my French will be better, and hopefully, I'll be a bit more employable at the end, because my French will have come up again, so it won't be wasted time. And it worked, and people did start hiring me pretty quickly. The first few months were a bit of a struggle, and after that, it really took off. And I made a great group of friends. And within a few months, I thought, I never want to leave. I think I want to build my life here. And, now it's been almost 3 years. I live with my French boyfriend. I've got a French dog. I will apply for dual nationality as soon as I can. And I think that my life is very much here now.
Before I wrap up, tell everyone where they can find your book and where they can find you and follow you as well.
But you can find it in lots of places, which is really exciting. I still get a bit kind of giddy seeing how many places are stocking it. You can buy Paddling France direct from the Brat website. Brat's the publishing house. It's available on Amazon, and it's available on Amazon pretty much regardless of where you live. Even if you're in the US, France, Australia, whatever, you can buy on Amazon. The majority of big bookstores in the UK will sell it as well. You've got quite a few of the the independent bookshops as well will sell it. So have a look if you've got a local bookshop that you want to support, or ask them to order it in as well. Because then then maybe it'll get sort of a little bit it'll get a little bit better known. And if you'd like to read more of my work, you can see everything that I've written on my website, which is www.annahRichards.com. Please don't judge my lack of technical ability. You're there to read the writing. I also publish a lot of my work on my Twitter account, which is @AnnaHRichards.
Anna Richards, it's been a pleasure talking to you about the book. Congratulations again. I really loved it. I will be paddling very soon. First, thank you for introducing me to paddling, and I'll speak to you very soon.
Thank you very much.
Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button to never miss an episode, and watch all my previous episodes from the show. You can also follow me on all my social media platforms.
That's it for Take a Wando Chefs. Hope to see you all soon. Until next time, bye for now.